Welcome to the iPad Podcast, a weekly podcast from Max Future.
Okay, this is Lex at maxfuture.com, and I'm back with iPad Podcast, episode 86, Jailbreak. And I'm back in the swing of things. I'm over my little coughing problem and chest congestion, so I can podcast again regularly. So sorry for the hiatus. I was back with this last week. So this is a podcast all about the iPad, and it's chit-chat free, and we just try to cover stories. I try to cover news stories, apps, devices, anything iPad related. So any positive feedback that you can give in the iTunes store will be greatly appreciated. Also on YouTube, on Blip TV, and also visit the website maxfuture.com. So here we go. Let's go to some of the more interesting stories in the past week. All right, so the first story I want to talk about really is something that came out this week that can affect a lot of people who have iPads, and that could be the people who are interested in jailbreaking their iPad. Now, some of you might be new to the iPad and the concept of jailbreaking, but what jailbreaking is, the ability to put on an app store on your iPad that is not Apple's app store. Now, Apple sells the iOS devices like the iPad and the iPhone and the iPod Touch with an app store that's exclusively Apple's. And you can theoretically install web apps just through going to a website and saving it to your iPad. But if you want an iPad app, you have to go to Apple's App Store. Well, back when the iPhone first came out, some people decided, hey, they wanted to put apps on the iPhone that Apple would not allow for various reasons. Some of them are for technical reasons. Some of them are maybe for ethical reasons or censorship reasons. So some of the technical reasons Apple would not want an app on the iPhone or the iPad is maybe because the app would interfere with other apps or cause problems, and it would prevent the smooth running of the iPad or iPhone, or maybe because the app was seeking to do too many powerful things that could maybe not work well on the iPhone or iPad, and Apple wanted everyone to have a really fantastic experience on the iPhone or iPad, so it wouldn't want those apps there. But the people who were technically minded and technically skilled hackers figured out ways to install app stores that were not approved by Apple and then sell or distribute for free apps through these alternative app stores. And over time, the jailbreak community, it was called jailbreaking, because the concept being that you're in a jail on the iPad or iPhone because you can't install whatever you want on it. The jailbreaking community, eventually the biggest app store is something called Cydia, Cydia. And the jailbreakers were in a cat and mouse game with Apple because every time Apple upgraded the hardware or upgraded the operating system of the iPad or iPhone, they would try to figure out a way to stop what's known as an exploit that the jailbreaking community found to put the jailbroken third-party app store on the iPhone or iPad. Well, anyways, this is a lot of background because the point I'm trying to make is that since Apple came out with iOS 5, which is the latest operating system for the iPad, the jailbreaking community has not been able to do what's known as an untethered jailbreak on the iPad 2 or the iPhone 4S, both of which have the A5 processor chip, until a couple of days ago. And the various jailbreakers were able to come up with a tool with an untethered jailbreak. Now, why do I say untethered? Because an untethered jailbreak means that if you install this third-party app store and then shut off your iPhone, you can reboot the iPhone and the store would still be there. there were jailbreaks that are tethered, but it basically required you to be connected to like iTunes on a computer, or a computer with the third-party jailbreaking app to restore the jailbreak. So anyways, the point is there's now a tool, and you should proceed at your own caution. It's called Absinthe, Green Poison Absinthe. And I'm looking at a website here called OSX Daily, and they've upgraded it. I did jailbreak my iPad and my iPhone, and you might ask, well, why would you want to jailbreak it? Well, I really wanted to jailbreak it for one reason, which is Apple allows you to take screenshots, that's pictures of what's on your iPad, through the iPad or through the iPhone. But you can't screen record, do a video screen recording. Apple doesn't have such an app and doesn't allow third parties to sell such an app. And for me, that's kind of useful, because if I do a video screen recording, I can show people how the iPad or iPhone is used and put that video up on YouTube or show it as part of this podcast. And there's a great third-party app called Display Recorder that a developer named Ryan Petrick in Canada developed. And, it's only a few bucks, and you put it on your iPhone or iPad, and it screen records, whatever you do on it, and saves it as a video. Now, it doesn't screen record, including the audio. The capabilities of the iPhone or iPad are such that Ryan Petrick hasn't been able to add that feature. Who knows, eventually there probably will be such a feature, but that's like one thing that I want. Other people jailbreak to add features that Apple doesn't provide. Now, Apple's, over time, as we got to iOS 5, Apple has added so many features to the iOS that used to be just only in the jailbreak community. So a lot of the reasons to jailbreak have gone away. But there's still others. Some people like to customize the background in a way that Apple, doesn't let you. Somebody has an app that allows you to customize Siri on an iPhone 4S so that the button changes colors depending on what you do, I guess. So there's all sorts of little tweaks and goodies that you can do if you jailbreak. And it's, my understanding is it's perfectly legal, because apparently in the last year, the Library of Congress, which is part of the federal government, basically ruled that you own your device and you can lawfully jailbreak it. Now, Apple might not be psyched or happy that you're jailbreaking it, but my experience in the past has been it's sort of like the old don't ask, don't tell policy in the armed services regarding gay servicemen. And so what I mean by that is, I think at most Apple stores, the people who work there know about jailbreaking. They might even do it themselves. So if you have a problem and your iPhone or iPad goes down because of jailbreaking, just take it to an Apple store and say, geez, I don't know what's going on. It doesn't seem to be working well. And if it's a software problem, they'll just connect it to a machine and reboot it, and it'll work fine. So I have a link to the OSX Daily website that has the story on the Green Poison Absinthe jailbreak. Basically, you download an app, you connect your iPad or iPhone or iPod Touch by USB to your Windows or your Mac, and then just press the jailbreak button, and basically, it takes a few minutes, and it does it. And when your iPad reboots, there's a new store that's there, and you can download apps. So it's pretty cool. So let me give you a sense of what jailbreaking looks like. So I installed on my iPad some jailbreaking apps, including the Cydia store, and I put them in this folder titled JB. So if you look here, here's the Cydia icon, and then And here's the app Display Recorder. I also have this app called My 3G, which basically allows you to download anything over 3G, even if Apple has made it so that you can't. For example, certain apps that are, or podcasts or music that's a certain size won't download over 3G, but with My 3G, it will, because it basically fools the operating system into believing that something being downloaded over 3G is really over Wi-Fi. And then Activator allows you to basically put cool controls on the iPad. For example, you can have an action that triggers some app when you swipe the screen a certain way. So look, Display Recorder, this is it that I'm in, basically allows you to record what's on your iPad. And one of the cool features which allows me to do this is it also has a feature where you can, through the Wi-Fi connection, have everything that's on the iPad mirrored to a web page on your web browser on your computer, which is cool. And then I'm screen capturing the web page. So that's the concept. I mean, here's what Cydia looks like. You launch it, and it's like its own app store. It's not as user-friendly, I would say, or as visually pleasing as the Apple App Store, but it's kind of commercial. There's a lot of free stuff, and then there's also paid stuff. And what I like about it is, even when I get rid of the jailbreak, the Cydia store remembers that apps that I bought, and I can re-download them. So I haven't had my iPad 2 jailbroken for quite some time, but as soon as I downloaded the Cydia store, I actually signed into my account using my Gmail email and a password, and it remembered, everything that I had bought, so I didn't have to pay for it again. So you can search the jailbreak store looking for stuff. You can look at sections, and in here, look, it's not as user-friendly as the Apple App Store. So you shouldn't really jailbreak unless you consider yourself sort of an advanced user. Because look, even these sections aren't as pretty as what Apple does with the App Store. But for example, there's a lot of add-ons. You can, I don't know, let's pick Color Keyboard. So there are all these apps where you can, change all sorts of themes. Now, I don't really monkey around with this stuff. I just keep it simple. I like a couple of apps. That's the 3G inhibitor app, so that I can download whatever I want over 3G. But there's other cool stuff. Here's one called YourTube, and you can save, gives you a little information here. You can save YouTube videos and add them to your iPod library. It's $5, but I'm not really that interested in that. So anyway, so that's the jailbreaking. Okay, so another big event really that happened last week that affects the iPad is that Apple had a special education event in New York City. And they have the video up. It was on January 19th, and it was held at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, which is a famous museum. And this was a huge education event. And basically what Apple is doing is it wants the iPad to be a huge tool in schools, particularly not just college, but K through 12, which is really crucial. So basically, Apple had this 1 hour announcement. You can see the whole video on its website. They've got Phil Schiller and Eddie Q, and a whole bunch of other executives from Apple. And basically, what are the things that they highlighted that affect us who have iPads, particularly us who have kids? Well, Apple really wants to make a big push in schools and the textbook market. So one of the things that they announced is that they upgraded iBooks so that it can be much more interactive and have much more content and sort of multimedia, video, audio, all sorts of things moving around, to make it much more interactive and to make the ebooks much more interactive. And the other thing Apple did is it partnered with the big textbook publishers, particularly the ones that provide textbooks to schools like Pearson and others. And they, this is kind of huge. And basically, all of a sudden, they have like content, and they're going to be selling it for $15 or less. So this was really significant. So reflecting their announcement, Apple has a page up now called Apple in Education, and it basically says, iBooks, textbooks for iPad. There's nothing textbook about them. And they really show off how innovative the textbooks are going to be. And they say that, I'll throw this in there. The other big thing that they announced is an authoring tool to make these textbooks interactive, and it's free. And it's called iBooks Author, and you can download it to a Mac and create multi-touch books that are interactive. So let's take one step at a time. So in the textbook announcement, they're saying, look, the textbook dilemma. They say that textbooks, are expensive. You got to carry them around. They weigh a lot, and they're basically saying they want to transform the textbook. And so one key component is to get publishers. And so they got McGraw-Hill, Pearson Education, and Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, three big publishers, which they say are responsible for 90% of the K-12 content. And they've created multi-touch textbooks available right now in iBooks. And you got to download a newer version of iBook, the iBook store, if you want to get it. And it's pretty impressive. I mean, I think this is a good idea. I do think that it's ultimately going to be better for everybody to have these electronic books. It's going to be more interesting for kids. They give examples, what these new what these new textbooks can do. You can have interactive images. You can have 3D images. You can, they give an example, in a textbook, the reader can manipulate the 3D objects with touch. So you could sort of rotate around, let's say, a molecule or something like that. You're going to have interactive images. So you can call out and zoom in on an image. And, here in the example they give on the website, they have like a geographic cutout of like a beach, and they can show like, oh, you could touch here and see this is the part where the whales are under the water. There's other things in the sand. You can have interactive galleries. It says instead of seeing just one image on the page, the reader can swipe through an entire collection of interactive photos. And if you think about it, the book is a very old-fashioned device for communication, and that's really in storing content and knowledge. And the book wasn't around forever. It was invented by Guggenheim in in the 1400s or something like that. And prior to that, people had scrolls. And so humans, unlike animals, have always relied on technology to evolve, and in terms of content, in terms of knowledge, in terms of learning. And I think this is the next evolution. So the new iBook, these interactive textbooks, you're going to be able to highlight and take note-taking directly in the book. You're going to be able to have study cards, it says. And they've released also a separate iTunes U app. Remember, iTunes U has all that education content that's for free, like videos and audio. Right now, that's been part of the iTunes app, but they're going to just have a separate app that deals with textbooks and iTunes University. So this is all big, and they had a 1-hour announcement about it. Now, the app is kind of cool because the app is sort of like Keynote and Pages, and right now you can, in Pages, create simple ebooks for distribution in the Apple iBook store or some other formats, or some other stores. However, this free iBook author app allows you to do and create these sort of multimedia textbooks. And so you also could create your own textbooks. It's apparently a lot like Keynote, where you just sort of drag video or audio and you put the text in. And you can also, if you know how to code using HTML5, you can also add your own HTML5 widgets. And you can add 3D objects, and so you can make these sort of intense multimedia books yourself, and you can submit it to the iBook store yourself, and Apple will, if you sell it, Apple will take a 30% cut and give you 70%, and you can also just distribute it for free. Now, this has caused some controversy because the ULA, which is the rights for what you can do with this app, basically say that if you're going to, first of all, the format that it comes out in is not an open source format. It's a format that only works in the iBook store. And it says you can't sell it, even though technically you can't distribute it some other way because of the technicalities. But it says you can only sell the output through the iBook store. And some people are upset about that. They say that this is terrible, this is monopolistic, and we'll get to that later in another story I want to discuss. But look, I think this is great. I mean, I want to play around with this iBook author, and for free, you can also generate an iBook author thing for free, put it on a website or email it to somebody, and they can easily add it to the iBook store. So families could create their own iBooks that are multimedia with their kids and share it with other family members for free. There's no restriction on that. So I think this is a really nifty tool. They have a video on their website that shows how to use it, and I think it's a great leap forward. I do think the iPad is going to be a great device for kids in the classroom. I was just at a dinner party the other day, and one of the people there, a guy, was a school teacher in New York public schools, and I was telling him about how you can use the iPad with the Apple TV hooked up to a monitor or projector to sort of wirelessly mirror everything that's on the iPad. And he deals with like 5-year-old or kindergarten kids, and right now he uses these really clumsy smart boards, these big, expensive electronic boards that are really hard for the kids to use, and they have to stand up there and electronically draw in a clumsy way. And, with the iPad, kids could sort of just be at their desk and like write with their finger or one of these, what are they called? Like the, stencils or whatever that you use to write on with on the iPad, and and share it on a website or project it on a board. So I think it's going to be a really useful tool in the classroom, and I think it's great that they released this. Okay, so like I mentioned, there was a little bit of a commotion regarding Apple's iBook Author app on the internet, and I think it was started by a guy named Ed Bott on ZDNet, and he wrote an article in which he referred to the license that Apple has as greedy and evil, and even John Gruber at Daring Fireball said it's Apple at its worst. And so, why are these people up in arms? Because basically, Apple created a free tool to create this sort of multimedia, interesting ebook. And they're basically saying if you want to sell what you've created in this sort of unique format, you have to sell it through Apple. And Apple has to take a cut. And you can't sell it somewhere else. Now, why is this evil, according to, Mr. Bott? He says, oh, well, I heard him on Leo Laporte's, I think, Tech TV show, and he was like, well, because Apple has like a monopoly in the tablet market, and it's trying to it's doing what Microsoft did with the browser, but this is a silly argument because, first of all, the market is books in general. And then at best, it's ebooks in general. And the ebook market right now is dominated by Amazon and the Kindle. Now, hold on a second. The Kindle format is proprietary. You format the book for the Kindle. That's a special format. It doesn't. If I buy a book on a Kindle, I can't then use it on iBookstore. I can't use it on another reader. It's a format that Amazon has exclusively for the Kindle, and Apple has no dominant market in the ebook market. And and to the extent Bott's claiming that Apple has a monopoly in tablets, well, yeah, it's the dominant maker of tablets, but tablets don't compete by themselves. Tablets, as we know, are competing with computers, laptops, and taking away market share from laptops and computers. And the tablets are a computer because we know PC sales have been going down. So Apple doesn't really have monopoly power to abuse the market for tablets. Monopoly power would be if Apple could somehow, raise prices and people would still have to buy tablets. Microsoft basically had a monopoly in operating systems on PCs because you had to go to Microsoft and pay them for their operating system. You really couldn't go somewhere else. So they could charge significant profits on it. Now, Apple can't, because if you raise the price of iPads too much, people aren't going to buy it. They're just going to stay, buying a netbook or some other, laptop that's cheap. Or there are all these Android tablets now coming up that are cheap, that cost, a couple $100. And obviously the Kindle Fire costs only $200. And that's some sort of tablet. So Bott's a little whacked out, I think, in saying Apple's greedy and evil. Look, Apple is competing in the ebook market with Amazon. And it's trying to create an enticing tool to make ebooks better on Apple's platform so that people will buy ebooks in the iBookstore. So why would Apple make a tool that could then be used to make great multimedia books to be sold in the Kindle App Store? That would not be good business for Apple, because Apple's not trying to, encourage sales on Amazon's Kindle store. Apple's trying to take away sales from Amazon's Kindle store because Amazon's Kindle store is the dominant ebook store. So Apple's basically saying, yeah, they have ebooks, but we have better ebooks. We have multimedia ebooks. So it's ridiculous to say it's Apple's at its worst. I mean, think about it. Apple has a program that you can get for free from Apple called Xcode. It's the program to develop apps on the Macintosh or on the App Store and the iPhone App Store. And Xcode basically just creates programs for the Macintosh and the iPad and the iPhone. And nobody complains and says, oh, it's so horrible that Xcode, only creates programs for those devices that are Apple's devices. Programs are content. And, it'd be ridiculous to say, oh, Xcode needs to be able to create programs for Windows computers. That'd be nuts. Or for websites, for programs on websites, or for Android. That's crazy. And so I think this is silly. I mean, I think if Apple was, Apple's not a philanthropy. Apple's not there to create open source programs so that people can create content for competing stores. So anyways, I'm looking at actually the website of Cult of Mac, and Mike Elgin, who also is on Leo Laporte's Twitch podcast, he wrote a post on Cult of Mac on January 21st, with which I pretty much agree. And he basically says that people are making an emotional response. And he basically points out that nobody is being coerced, that Apple's iBooks author is just an offer. Take it or leave it. Nobody is being coerced, he says. So he's basically saying people are having like an emotional response and not really thinking logically about this. And he basically is saying, Apple's doing what it has to do. He says Apple's strategy, as I pointed out last week, is to become the eventual publishing platform of choice. To this end, they have undercut Amazon's royalty program viciously, offering terms that are to Kindle publishing what the Kindle Fire is to iPad in terms of pricing, generally less than half. They have strongly incentivized the publication of totally free books. They have offered another great author-friendly channel for distribution that in no way prevents authors from publishing the same content on any platform, including direct competitors. And they have created a legal framework that will prevent iBooks from being filled with shameless spam in the guise of books. And then he goes on to say, emotional responses to this license agreement are natural, given the usual terms it contains. But once the emotion has subsided and the facts are considered with a cool head, Apple's new iBook author looks like a pretty good deal. And he says, I'm predicting that a whole lot of authors are going to love it. And his point is, one of the points he makes is you can take the content that you put into this iBook author app and just put it in some other app and distribute a book on some other platform. So the content that you put in there isn't restricted in selling in the iBook store, but rather, if you want to use this tool to create this specific format, you got to sell it in iBooks. And look, I think that's reasonable. So that's my say on this controversial piece. Now, the Wall Street Journal chimed in on this little controversy about Apple's e-textbook plans entitled, they had an article in Speakeasy entitled, Is There a Worm in Apple's e-textbook plans? And the commentary by a guy named Jeffrey Yang, he basically made a couple of points. He basically said, one of the problems with this plan is that it's for schools, and yeah, the textbooks are only $15, but how are schools going to afford $399 iPads? And and he basically talked about this guy who has the Khan Institute, which offers sort of very cheap and free, education stuff on the internet for poorer people. And I think he's got a valid point, but, big public schools do have decent budgets, and they could basically, supposedly Apple has a leasing program for the iPads with the schools where they pay over a 5-year period. And I don't know how expensive that would be. I mean, the textbooks are pretty expensive. So if the electronics are only $15 and you're spreading out the cost of a $400 iPad over 4 years, I don't think that's too expensive in terms of school budgets, particularly if there's financing and particularly if you're saving a lot on these expensive paper books. And plus, if you're getting an educational benefit, because you don't just have the textbooks, you also have these apps that can do all sorts of interactive things. And I was with this, this teacher, and basically I was pointing out to him that you can do all this cool stuff with the iPad, like with AirPlay and interactivities. And so the kids could stay at their desks and just draw the letters and show all the other kids in the classroom how they're doing it. Or they could show their interactive project and project it, and all kids could sort of interact. And already there are apps like there's this one app where you can be the controller of the document and then send it to 12 or 20 other iPads and sort of control the presentation. So there's a lot that could be done in the education field with iPads, just without, not just the textbooks. So I do think schools will invest in it. But I also think that, look, Apple will, I think, if this takes off, just like they did with the iPod, where they had a whole line of iPods, I do think eventually Apple's going to come out with a cheap, more limited multimedia ebook reader that competes with something like the Kindle Fire. And I could see Apple coming out with, let's say, a 10-inch, highly limited, iPad Lite device. Maybe that doesn't have all the processor power of the higher-end iPad, but can handle multimedia books. So that's going to come down the line. That's what I think. So I don't know. I actually think this is cool that Apple's going in this way. Yes, it's not perfect in terms of what everybody wants, but it does provide tools for people to create these multimedia ebooks, and Apple is getting the big textbook manufacturers to sell these textbooks for a really cheap price of $15. So, that's very positive. So what will be special about Apple's next display in the iPad 3? Well, there's some clue of that in a very interesting article in CNET by Brooks Crothers entitled Secrets to Apple Success Displays. And what Mr. Crothers points out is that Apple has been sort of at the cutting edge of pushing new technology. And he points out, Thunderbolt, the connection technology. Apple has a deal with Intel, and, it's one of the first computer manufacturers to incorporate the Thunderbolt high-speed connection in Macintoshes, and other companies now are coming out with that. But also Apple, he points out that, look with the current displays. The iPad has something called IPS, and he says that IPS, which is in-plane switching technology, was marginal for a long time, he says, and largely ignored until Apple said it was important. He's quoting some guy named Shim, who I think works at, where does Shim work? I think at Sharp Technology. No, he's an analyst at something called Display Search. And then he makes the same point with Gorilla Glass, which is Corning's Gorilla Glass, and he says, Shin says Gorilla Glass was not a big deal. In fact, Corning did not know what to do with it. Then Jobs called up Wendell Weeks at Corning and said, hey, I want to use this glass. Then all of a sudden it becomes popular. That's the glass on the iPhone and the iPad that's hard to break. I mean, it does break eventually, but, it's not delicate. So the point is that apparently Sharp, which is a big electronics manufacturer, is developing something called IGZO, which stands for indium gallium zinc oxide. And he thinks, this guy Shim, who's this analyst, that Apple is going to adopt this technology in future iPads. And Shin told Crothers in a phone interview that for Sharp, IGZO is a big deal. And because if Sharp can make them in huge commercial volumes, then it may become, and Apple adopts it, then IGZO will become the standard for the next generation of displays. In other words, other companies follow what Apple does. And supposedly, the benefits of IGZO are that it improves the brightness and also has lower power consumption for high-resolution displays. And, I guess in this article, they speculate that Apple will use this IGZO technology in the rumored high-pixel iPad 3, which could be 2048 by 1536 pixels. That would be really high pixel concentration. So basically what this article is saying is that Apple could adopt this technology, which provides for brighter screens with lower power, which could be great. So we'll have to see. I mean, it's an interesting concept because the lower power would mean that you'd get even better battery life, or you wouldn't suffer lower battery life with these higher powered, higher pixel screens. So we'll have to see. All right, so let's talk about some fun stuff where there's a famous artist named David Hockney, and according to HuffingtonPost.com, he loves the iPad, and he started doing art a while back on the iPad, and apparently his iPad art is now on display in England's Royal Academy. So this is pretty cool. It says here that Hockney is 74 years old, and he has a new exhibition at the Royal Academy, which will include landscapes that he drew on the iPad, and then he blew it up and printed on paper. And it says here that Hockney admits he didn't take to the Apple device quickly. Quote, he says, it took me a while to realize it's a quite serious tool you can use. And actually, there's a link to the website here at the Hockney, and I don't know. There seems to be a nice picture of landscape. So it's, it just shows you how the iPad is really becoming a tool for all sorts of people, including extremely serious and famous artists like David Hockney. Okay, so now one of the more strange stories that I read, and just kind of, kind of disturbing, or as a threat to Apple, is a story I read on theloop.com. Actually, they're reporting on something in Reuters in which they say that in China, the Communist Party members can now purchase a tablet PC to verify identification cards, read the blogs of cadres, and manage state-owned firms without using an iPad. And apparently there's an Android-based tablet in China for the Communist Party called Red Pad Number 1, and it's filled, according to the quote from Reuters, with software applications catered to a party official's every need for control, and it's delivered in leather case and costs $1,600, which is twice as much as Apple's most expensive iPad 2. So, apparently a spokesman for Red Pad Number 1, some guy named Lou Zanri, said that the price was high because of a number of pre-installed apps that cater to bureaucrats and state-owned company managers. So, who's footing the bill for these government-owned, expensive Android tablets? And will this hinder Apple's sale of the iPad in China? I don't think so, because I know that there's a thriving market in people buying iPads here and then selling them for a profit in China. There's a huge demand from everyday people, and everyday people aren't going to want what communist leaders have. Everyday people want what they think, the glamorous West has, like Chanel perfume and clothes and Louis Vuitton bags. That's what they want, and Apple's sort of in that category. Okay, so one of the cool things that companies are now doing with the iPad is that they're integrating them into other devices that work together with the iPad. And there's a electronic music equipment show called NAMM every year, and the Verge.com had an interesting article about the company Alesis, Alesis, and they've been around for years. They make great musical equipment, and they apparently have something called the DM dock, Alesis DM dock, and the amp dock for iPad. And The Verge has a nice little article, but basically it's very cool. The DM dock turns your iPad into a fully fledged MIDI drum model. So you place your iPad into this, and then around the back there are dozens of inputs for trigger pads, a hi-hat control pedal, and a quarter-inch stereo output. And it also has MIDI inputs and outputs and a USB port and a mount that you can use separately. And I guess then you can interact with this drum module through the iPad, and it's compatible with both the first and second iPad, and costs $249 and is coming out in the second quarter of 2012. Then the other thing that they talked about is something called the amp dock, which they say acts as an audio interface for your iPad and iPad 2, and that you can use one of many apps that support Core MIDI, which is a electronic music standard that's been around for decades, like Amplitude or GarageBand, as the amp modulator, and it provides quarter-inch inputs and outputs and control knobs. So basically, it looks like you put your iPad into this thing, and then there's hardware that works with it. So it's pretty cool. Let's see what the gallery looks like of the pictures. And, it's creating a new device. You take your iPad, you stick it into this equipment, and, you get like sort of a new type of musical device. So I think we're going to see more of this, and there are very cool pictures on the Verge website of like an iPad put into these different Alesis musical hardware products. You're going to see what? You're going to see people have pianos made. Like, there's those Kurzweil. Well, though there are those pianos that you can control electronically with MIDI. They're acoustic pianos, and I could see people just building it so you can just plop an iPad in there and control it, because the iPad's a tremendous controller for all sorts of things. I mean, you're going to see maybe cars made where you just put an iPad in, and that becomes maybe the controller for a lot of the functions in the car. So the iPad, I think, because it's becoming kind of universal, is going to be integrated in a lot of devices. I mean, don't you think at some point somebody's going to make a refrigerator that you're going to be able to put an iPad in it, And so then you're going to have the iPad there as a screen to watch videos, but also maybe, who knows, control some of the functions of the refrigerator. So anyways, this is a very interesting story, and I have a link to it on the links for this podcast. Okay, so something else that caught my eye this week is a new stand that I read about on something called Technabob.com. And what's interesting about the stand is it's kind of slim and small and elegant, and it works with the iPad too, and it uses the magnets on the iPad to prop it up. So according to this article, the Magnus is a desktop stand made from aluminum and integrated with neodymium magnets, which will attach onto your iPad too. It says, because of its compact, minimal design, the Magnus has the added benefit of making it seem like your iPad is standing up by itself with nothing holding on to it. And it says you'll need to use two hands to pry it away from the powerful magnets. So it's kind of cool, and it's going to cost $50. So it's definitely a very elegant looking stand. Now, hopefully the magnets are really strong. I know sometimes with the smart cover I have that they sometimes slide off the iPad. But it sounds like there are magnets in the stand itself that work with the magnets that are in the iPad to really make it cling. And for $50, it looks like a very simple, elegant stand that could be, very useful. So it's called the Magnus stand, and it's made by a company called 10-1 Design. Here's the website if you're looking at the video version of this. And 10-1, they've got pictures. I mean, it is kind of a pretty stand, but much more minimal than anything else I've seen. Other products they have, I guess they have a lot of stuff. They have the Pogo stylus. That's the word that I was looking for before. And they have something called Fling, which are game controllers. So they have, and then they have some apps. So they have a lot of iPad-related stuff. Now, another sign that the iPad is penetrating the enterprise is an article out on something called www.financialnews.com. And it basically says that the big bank JP Morgan is launching an app that will help with the custody arm of its business. And it says here, JP Morgan Security Services Division will join the ranks of custodians. These are financial institutions that have custody of, let's say, your securities or assets, and launching applications to give clients the latest information via mobile phone and other devices. And it basically says that JP Morgan Worldwide Security Services will launch an iPad app this quarter called Access for Securities, which will allow clients to see information on JP Morgan Access Portal, which is a secure website platform for information compliance and portfolio management. And so, I mean, these could be broker-dealers that have their assets custodied there. So this is a real sort of enterprise-type app. It says the move follows on the heels of BNY Mellon, the world's largest custodian, launching a mobile app. So, this is a trend. We're seeing the iPad, have apps that are clearly designed for the enterprise, and it looks like the big banks and securities firms are doing it too. Now, in terms of cool apps that have come out, there's an app that came out on January 17th that looks pretty good for the education market. It's only $2.99, and it's called Biobots Undersea Rescue. And basically, it's for, I guess learning about undersea world. It says you can design underwater rescue robot, and it's inspired by nature's super animals. And basically, it's almost like a game too. And it has the grand opening of the underwater Biobot Zoo, a collection of mechanical animal robots created by a scientist. And when a catastrophe strikes, an earthquake damages the underwater museum and visitors get stuck. The description goes on to say, you happen to be trapped in the scientist's lab. Now you have a mission: study the database of the scientist's records and design an underwater rescue robot to save the visitors. And it goes on to say, work with your child to learn about the different marine creatures, such as the platypus, the whale, the pike, the mussel, and squid, through videos and animation, understanding the adaptations that make each of them so unique. So it's basically a game and an educational tool about the undersea world. And I think we're going to see more of this. I mean, it looks kind of interesting. There's little drawings of a submarine, and you can build, I don't know, I guess underwater fish and stuff. And the ratings so far are 6 ratings, I guess 5 stars. But my point is, look, it's only $3. If your kids that are at all interested in underwater creatures and stuff, and this is a game, it's might be worth poking around. And stuff like this comes out every day on the iPad, which I think goes hand in hand with the Apple's initiative in the textbook market for kids. Multimedia textbooks are going to be great, but people are also creating these sort of educational apps that are really fun to play with and good for kids. Now, another app you might want to get, because it's on sale right now, and it's from Electronic Arts, is Monopoly for iPad. It's the classic game of Monopoly. Now, I just bought it because it's on sale for 99 cents, which is, it's very cheap. It's funny because I recently started playing the real board game, Monopoly, with my kids. And, I think it might be fun to have the electronic version also. So apparently in this you can have different modes. There's tabletop mode, where you can gather around the iPad and just play on that as the tabletop. There's the teacher mode, where you can play against the computer in the iPad and get tips and tricks to help you strategize in future games. And there's also enhanced graphics because it's on the iPad. And I think there's also the ability to network with other iOS devices. I'm not sure about that. But look, it's only $1, and at the very least, it'll help you learn maybe the board game. It does. It says here you can play against friends on iPad or iPhone or iPod Touch. So we've seen this with the Scrabble game, where you can use, the devices together and interact through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now, I did that with the Battleship app, and I'm going to try doing this with the Monopoly app, so we'll have to see how it works. Okay, another app that seems like a bargain for the iPad that's, I guess, relatively new is called Dartsy. And it's a dartboard game where you can throw darts on the iPad, or virtual darts. And I don't know, it seems to have a kind of a unique design. And again, it's only 99 cents. It says Dartsy is the most elegant dart game scoring app in the App Store. So I guess maybe it's for just keeping track of your dart throwing. It says you can play cricket with up to 4 players and challenge your opponents in game sets of 1, 3, or 5. And there's a universal version coming soon. So it supports up to 4 players, and you can choose on what sides of the board they're on. And I don't know, it seems kind of unique. Again, it's only 99 cents. And it says here, once a number is closed, Dartsy will make it see through to help you see what's left. So I'm not a dart playing person, but it seems to try to be authentic to the dartboard playing game, or the game of Dartsy, I guess. So again, it's only 99 cents. It was last updated January 21st of this year. Now, I'd be remiss not to point out to you what are some of those popular games for the iPad. One of the biggest ones is Temple Run, and I think that's free. And it's one of the most downloaded games on the app. And basically, the description is it's a treasure hunting adventure movie. Basically, it's a adventure in the jungle, basically, and the features include simple swipe and tilt controls. You can level up your characters and use your power-ups. Original 3D running mechanic, combining turning, jumping, sliding, and tilting. And the reviews say it's endless running game in the App Store, voted by Touch Arcade forums as Game of the Week. So I'm going to check this out. It's only 19.5 megabytes in size, and I guess one of the things I want to do in 2012 is download and play more games on the iPad. I've already played a number of games, but I think more, there are more to play. Now, one app that I did buy recently and I started to play with and costs only $2.99 is also incredibly popular, and it's called Fruit Ninja HD. And I got it because I was with my son in the Apple Store in Grand Central Station, and they had it several iPads, out on display, and he started playing with one, and he just took to this game, and it's a lot of fun. Essentially, you chop up fruit like you're sort of a fruit ninja, and it's very cool, and it's kind of addictive, and it's kind of therapeutic, chopping up the fruit, and you can use multiple fingers to do the chopping. So let me see if I can give you a little preview of how you play it. Okay, so here is Fruit Ninja. Let's launch it. And, all right, here we go. We're loading. Let's see if there's any sound. And the graphics are very pretty. And, I'm not an expert in this, but let's see, slice. All right, here we go. So we're slicing the fruit. Here's the, this kind of fun music. And you can see me. I'm just sort of cracking. All right, I'm gonna get a new blade. All right, I'm gonna pick this one. Here we go. All right. So I'm just sort of slicing away, and all right. I still need to learn this, but the graphics are beautiful. And it's just fun to do. So I'm gonna just slice away, and so you seem to unlock higher levels of ninja stuff. And let's see, I'll select that one, and you get the idea here. Basically, you can see my fingers sort of slicing on this. So it's just, there's something very fun about slicing fruit. So I highly recommend the app. I'm just starting to learn it, and so are my kids, but I think we're going to have fun with it. Okay, but I want to end this podcast with this kind of disturbing story from Channel 7 News in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. They have on their website a story entitled TSA Officer and Wife Arrested in iPad Thefts. And it says here that at Miami International Airport, police arrested a TSA officer and his wife after authorities said they stole, then tried to sell 2 iPads from a passenger's luggage. It said the victim, Steve, said he departed from Miami International Airport and traveled on a cross-country Christmas flight when he discovered that stuff was missing from his luggage. And what were missing were 2 brand new iPad 3Gs that he purchased for his brother and sister. And he said he packed them in a brown bag. Then he put the brown bag inside another suitcase and checked his luggage at the American Airlines counter. And when he got back to LA, they were gone. And it said here that the iPad chargers remained in the box. So they arrested a TSA officer, Miami-Dade detective's name, Michael Pujol, along with his wife Betsy, and he admitted that he slid the iPads into a secret pocket in his uniform, and then his wife took the goods and put them up for sale on Craigslist. So this is pretty bad stuff. So, I think there are thefts that are going on regarding iPhones and iPads just because they're so coveted. So be careful when you're going through the airport with your iPad. I mean, I always just carry it, in my sort of hand bag or computer bag, and I have my eye on it at all time. So anyways, shame on these people stealing the iPads. That's not good. So be careful out there, everybody. Okay, so that's it for episode 86 of the iPad podcast. This is Lex at Max Future. Thanks for listening, and remember, this is a chit-chat-free podcast, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
This has been a Max Future production.